Hi, welcome to Lesson 1-3, which is multiplying and dividing real numbers. Today we are taking a look at these operations, and by the end of the lesson you want to be able to multiply and divide real numbers. First, I just want you to do a little bit of an exploration activity. I want you to use a calculator to find the following products or quotients, and then just think about some of these questions here. So what patterns are you starting to notice about the signs of the answers? And then just think about when the product or quotient of two real numbers is positive, when the product or quotient is negative, and what type of reasoning do you think that you would have if you had the product of five negative numbers? So go ahead and pause the video and just try and think through these problems on your own. Our vocabulary for this lesson is going to be looking at reciprocal and then also multiplicative inverses. Hopefully when you're working on the calculator, you begin to notice that when we are multiplying and dividing numbers with the same sign, the answer is going to be positive. Okay, so I'd make sure that you get that down. So for example, we have 4 times 5. They're both positive, so we have positive 20. Here we have negative 15 divided by negative 3. We still get positive 5. So you treat the numbers that you're looking at as if the negative sign wasn't even there, and then you're just going to either put in the negative sign or not put it in depending on the question. So in that same respect, if you are multiplying and dividing numbers with different signs, your product or quotient is always going to be negative. So here, if you notice, we're still taking 6 times 3. We're getting 18, but now because we have a negative, because they have different signs, it's negative 18. Same thing here, negative 18, positive 2, different signs, so we have negative 9. So let's look at a couple of examples. So here we have positive 1/2 times negative 10. So we know, since they have different signs, that our answer is going to be negative. And now we can just say half of 10, or if you need to, make it into a fraction, 10 over 1. Would become negative 5. Same thing for example B. We have 2 negatives, so we know our answer is going to be positive. So now we can just do 48 divided by 4, which would be 12. So our answer would be positive 12. Now let's try an example with a variable. So we want to find the value of the expression. So we want to find out what negative 3x equals when x is 2/3. So remember, we're going to substitute 2/3 in for x. So we have 3 times 2/3. We have different signs. We know our product is going to be negative. Here we can put 3 over to 1 in order to multiply our fractions. Now I always like to reduce beforehand, so since we have the 3's, we can divide each by 3 and we get 1. So 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 1 is 1, so we have negative 2 over 1, or just negative 2. So just a quick review of finding the product when we have fractions. Remember, we just multiply straight across, so we have 7 times 6, which is 42. Since we have different signs, this is going to be negative 42. And then 9 times 11 is 99. And then we could reduce from there. Or we can look, because 9 and 6 share a common factor of 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. 9 divided by 3 is 3. We can actually do the same thing and reduce ahead of time. 7 times 2 is 14. That's a negative and a positive. 3 times 11 is 33. And then that would be our final answer. Now notice I didn't factor in or account for a negative sign in the bottom because it was only with that negative 7. So even though we say negative 7/9, the negative only goes with either the top or the bottom. So let's look at this next example. We have negative 2 1/3 times 3 2/5. Remember, in order to multiply mixed numbers, we have to first change them into improper fractions. So we would take 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. Notice the only thing that's different, so we bring that negative sign down. It doesn't affect the actual mixed number in proper fraction at all. Same thing here, 5 times 3 is 15, plus 2 is 17. Now this time we can't actually do any reducing ahead of time, so we just have to go ahead and multiply straight across. So we're going to do 7 times 17, which gives us 119. Different sign, so it's going to be a negative, and then 3 times 5 is 15. So we have negative 119 over 15, or we can change it back into a mixed number by taking 119 divided by 15, in which case you get 7 and 14 over 15, and because we had a negative, this would be a negative 7 and 14/15. Another part of looking at multiplying and dividing real numbers is what happens when we're working with fractions, and that's looking at the concept of reciprocals. So two numbers are reciprocals if their product is 1. A number and its reciprocal are called multiplicative inverses. To divide by a number, you can multiply by its reciprocal or multiplicative inverse. Okay, so for example here, 10 divided by 5 is 2 is the same thing as taking 10 times 1/5, which ends up being 10 over 5, which reduces to 2. So dividing by 5 is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal of 5, or 1/5. So just a reminder that you can write the reciprocal of a number by switching the numerator and denominator. A whole number always has a denominator of 1. So for example, if I had 3, its reciprocal would be 1/3, because 3 is really the same thing as 3 over 1. Or if I had 2/3, I'm just going to flip it over, so this would become 3 over 2. So let's look through a couple of examples. We have negative 1/2 divided by negative 5/6. So I'm just going to not even pay attention to the negative signs until the end. So we have 1/2, since we're doing division, we're going to flip this over, so this becomes 6 over 5. Now it's going to become a multiplication problem. Once again, I like to reduce ahead of time. These are each divisible by 2, so this is 1, this is 3, 1 times 3 is 3, 1 times 5 is 5. We have a negative and a negative, so our answer is positive. So our final answer is going to be 3/5. Now I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and try the second one on your own. And then when you restart it, you can check. So we're going to leave 8/9, change it to a multiplication. 2 2/3, though I have to remember I have to change it to an improper fraction first. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 2 is 8, so this becomes 8/3, but it's a negative. So when I flip that over, it's going to be negative 3/8. Now here, 8 and 8 are each divisible by 1, 3 and 9 each divisible by 3, 1 times 1 is 1, 3 times 1 is 3, we have 1 negative, so our answer would be negative 1/3. So another thing we want to remember is that no number can be multiplied by 0 to give a product of 1. So 0 has no reciprocal, no multiplicative inverse, no reciprocal. And because 0 has no reciprocal, division by 0 is not possible. And we say that division by 0 is undefined. It's not possible. You'll get an error message on your calculator. So let's look at some properties of 0. First, we have multiplication by 0. The product of any number and 0 is 0. So 1/3 times 0 is 0, 0 times negative 17 is 0, or algebraically, a times 0 is 0, or 0 times a is 0. Pretty straightforward. Another property is when 0 is divided by a number. Now, this is where you have to be careful. So the quotient of 0 and any non-zero number is 0. So here, I can have 0 cookies divided by 6 friends, I get 0 cookies. Same thing here, if I have 0 cake and I'm dividing into pieces that are 2/3 each, there's 0 pieces. Or algebraically, 0 divided by a divided by 0. The tricky part is when we actually look at the division by 0. So division by 0 is undefined. You can't actually take the 12 and divide it by 0 or the negative 5 divided by 0. You will always get an answer that is undefined, or on your calculator you will get an error message. So just really quickly, why don't you try these 3 on your own, pause the video, and then check your work. 0 divided by 15, since it's 0 divided by 15, this one is just 0. Negative 22 divided by 0, since we're dividing by 0, this one is undefined. And then here we have negative 8 and 45 hundredths times 0, since it's multiplication, it's just 0. Now let's look at some real life applications of this. The speed of a hot air balloon is 3 3/4 miles per hour. It travels in a straight line for 1 1/3 hour before landing. We want to know how many miles away from the liftoff site does the balloon land. So to find the distance traveled at a rate of 3 3/4 miles per hour for 1 1/3 hours, we multiply rate times time. A good formula to know is that distance is always equal to your rate multiplied by your time. This formula is one you will use quite often. It's good to get down and remember. So here we have it set up already, 3 3/4 times 1 1/3. Remember, we're going to change them each into improper fractions. 4 times 3 is 12, plus 3 is 15, so I have 15 fourths times 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4. Okay, 4 over 3. The 4's cancel out, become 1's. 5 divided by 3 is 5, 3 divided by 3 is 1. 5 times 1 is 5, 1 times 1 is 1, 5 over 1, or we traveled for a total distance of 5 miles. So now why don't you try this one out on your own? So what if another hot air balloon trip, the wind speed is 5.25 or 5 1/4 miles per hour, and the trip is planned for 1.5 hours. The balloon travels in a straight line. We want to know how many miles away from the liftoff site will the balloon land. So remember, speed times time equals distance. So try this one out on your own. So here we have 5 25 hundredths times 1.5 hours. So you're going to go ahead and multiply those out, which is going to give you 7,875,000 miles that they travel, or that they'll be away from the liftoff site. So to recap our lesson, when we're multiplying two numbers, the signs of the numbers you are multiplying determine whether the product is positive or negative. So notice each of these, same numbers that we're using, just different signs. Positive times a positive, 3 times 5, 15, positive. Positive 3, negative 5, negative 15, negative. Negative 3, negative 5, both are negative, it's a positive 15. And this is also true for division. So now I want you to pause the video and try the lesson quiz. Try each of these problems and then check how you did at the end of the video. 35 divided by negative 7. So we're going to do 35 divided by 7. It's going to be 5. They have different signs, so it's negative 5. 2 times x, for x is negative 6, becomes 2 times negative 6. 2 times 6 is 12. A positive times a negative is negative 12. Negative 3 divided by 1 3/4. So we have negative 3 over 1 times, I'm going to take this, 4 plus 3 is 7, so this is 7/4. So it becomes 4/7, which would be negative 12/7. Or, if we change it into a mixed number, 1 5/7 as a negative. 2 1/3 and as a negative times 0 is just going to be 0. Here, because we're dividing by 0, is undefined. And lastly, if a cyclist is traveling on a straight road for 1 1/4 miles at a speed of 12 miles per hour, how many miles? So remember, distance equals rate times time. So their rate 12 miles per hour times their time, 1 1/4 hour. If we change it into a improper fraction, we 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5. So 12 over 1 times 5 over 4. And reduce, this becomes 1, this becomes 3. 3 times 5 is 15, 1 times 1 is 1, for a final answer of 15 miles.